Hey everyone, and welcome back to the PTG Rail Routes Learning series. In this episode, we're going to be taking another look at Train Sim World. I'm going to be driving a journey in service mode on the recently released Long Island Railroad route. So the service that I'm driving is the 1800 service, which is numbered 717, on the Hempstead Branch between Hempstead and New York Penn Station, for a total journey distance of around 21¾ miles. Our stops along the way will include Floral Park, Jamaica, and finally New York Penn Station. The train that I'm driving on this journey today is an M7 electric multiple unit. The M7s were manufactured by Bombardier Transportation and have been in service since 2002, with a second variant, the M7A, being in service since 2004. They're part of the M series of electric multiple units and were constructed between 1999 and 2006. A total of 1,172 cars have been built, with 836 of these going to the Long Island Railroad and 336 going to the Metro North Railroad. They're formed of married pairs of cars, so there's actually just 2 cars per unit, and the train that I'm driving today is an 8-car train, so it's 4 units connected together. They have a maximum design speed of 100 miles per hour with a maximum in-service speed of 80 miles per hour. They have a power output of 270 horsepower per motor with 4 Mitsubishi Electric AC traction motors per car, and they run on the 750 volts DC third rail electrification system, which is found throughout the Long Island Railroad. Now in the cab of the unit, let's quickly go through the setup procedure here. So the first thing that I need to do is to move the master key to the on position. So you can see the master key in front of us there. If I now just click on it and drag the mouse upwards, we've now managed to turn that on. The next thing I'm going to do is move the reversing handle into the forward position just by pressing S once. You're actually moving the reverser backwards there from the key out position to the forward position that you can see it's now in. Now what I need to do is to move the brake handle from the emergency position to the maximum brake position. And now that I've done that, I need to charge the braking system. So just in front of us, slightly to the left there, you can see that there's a button with a green surrounding area which says charging. And so if I now click and hold that, if you look at the bottom right of the screen, you can see there that the brake pipe pressure is now charging. So now I can let go now that we've managed to charge the brake system, which now means that the braking system is usable. The next thing I'm going to do is press the I key to turn on the instrument light there, and you can see just in front of us the brake gauge, the analog brake gauge, with the brake cylinder pressure being the red needle, and so the higher that needle is pointing, then the harder the brakes are applied. However, with this particular unit, it uses regenerative braking as well as air braking. As a result of that, when I apply the brakes at higher speeds, you'll see that the dynamic brake is in use, and you won't actually see much activity as far as the brake cylinder pressure goes until we're traveling at a slower speed. So now that I've done that, I'm going to just show you some of the cab controls here. So in front of us to the left, we've got the horn control. And now that I've sounded the horn, one thing to point out for this particular train that I found unusual is that there's actually no bell, whereas most trains within the USA actually use a bell. This one doesn't. Now continuing around the cab, in front of us there is the power controller, which is a combined throttle and brake. So as you move it towards you, then you're reducing the braking, and then you've got the neutral position for coast, and then if you continue moving it towards you further, then you're applying power. Now this is a smoothly controlled handle, so there's no notches for either the power or braking on this unit. The next thing I'm going to do now is to turn on the alerter system and the ATC system, which is part of the signalling. So if I press Control and numpad enter, and Shift and numpad enter, we've now got the alerter switched on, and also the signalling system is now active. The display in the middle of the cab there is the signal display. You can see currently there's a light there illuminated at 15, which indicates that our current maximum permitted speed is 15 miles per hour regardless of the line speed. So if you're driving along, then you have to obey the lower of the two speed limits, be it the signal speed or the line speed. Whichever is lower, that is the speed that you need to drive at. As you can see, there's a series of numbers there. So if, for example, the signal speed changes to 60 miles per hour, then the 60 light will illuminate. Now, if you're traveling at 60 miles per hour, and then say the signal speed drops to 40, then what you need to do is you need to apply the brakes first, and then press Q to acknowledge the signalling system, and then continue to slow down to 40 miles per hour, and then once you're down to 40, you just continue driving as normal. Of course, just to the right of that there, you can see on the computerized display a digital speed readout. So you've got the speed written in the middle, currently at 0 miles per hour, which will go up as we're accelerating. And then also, in addition to that, you will see a bar which goes around the outside of the speedometer. So that bar corresponds with the speed that we are currently traveling at. Also, just to the right of the speedometer, you can see there's a small gauge there which has got tractive effort and dynamic brake. And so with that gauge, if you're applying power, then there should be a bar which is above the center, pointing towards the tractive effort, and then the more power that you apply, the higher that should go, up to a certain point. And then conversely, if you've got the brakes on, then you'll see a bar coming down away from that to demonstrate that the brakes are currently applied. Now, the final thing I'm going to do here is just to open the window, because you can hear the noise of the unit better and also hear the noise of the air rushing past outside, which I personally think sounds much better than if you're driving with the window closed. So I now need to turn on the headlights. I just remembered that. So that is the final thing I'm doing now, turning on the headlights. And we're now ready to depart away from Hempstead towards New York Penn Station. So let's take now another quick look outside the train before we depart out on our journey. Departing away from Hempstead, the starting speed limit here is 15 miles per hour as imposed by the signalling, though the line speed is in fact 30 miles per hour, and we've got around 4.5 miles to go to our first stop, which is Floral Park. And I say around 4.5 miles, it's probably actually slightly further than that, as I've noticed that the HUD within Train Sim World, when driving on the practice runs, actually displays the distance to the next station in the straight line as the crow flies distance, rather than the distance via the track that you're currently travelling on. The signal speed limit has now gone up to 60 miles per hour, so we're able to accelerate up to the line speed of 30. And then very shortly there's going to be a 15 mile per hour speed restriction imposed by the line speed about halfway through the platform of the next station, which is Country Life Press, which will be coming up very shortly. Just allowing the train to coast at this point, and then as we enter the platform at Country Life Press, I'm going to start applying the brakes at that point, ready for the speed restriction halfway along. And I have noticed that with this route, much like with the North Jersey coast route in Train Simulator, that there's actually no signs indicating changes in the line speed. And you've got to really know the route, especially when driving without the HUD, to know where the speed changes are. Now that we're at 15 miles per hour, I'm going to go between idle and low power to try and maintain this speed. The signal speed has now dropped to 30 miles per hour, and whilst this doesn't affect us because we're currently doing 15, you do still need to acknowledge the ATC system alarm to prevent any brake applications. So do bear that in mind, that even if you're going slower than the signal speed change, you do still need to acknowledge the ATC. The signal speed's now dropped further down to 15 miles per hour, which again doesn't affect us at present, but it will affect us in a moment when the line speed goes up, as the line speed's going to go up before the signal speed does. Now that we've crossed the point there, the line speed is now going up to 30 miles per hour, and then immediately before the platform at Garden City Station, which is coming up in a moment, the line speed is going up further to 60 miles per hour. We're now passing through Garden City Station, and as already mentioned, the line speed is now going up to 60 miles per hour, though at present we're still under an imposed 15 mile per hour signal speed restriction. I'm not quite sure why that is, but this 15 signal speed limit goes on for quite a way after the line speed is increased, before we're able to accelerate further. In fact, by the time that the signal speed limit has increased, then the line speed will have also increased further to 70 miles per hour. So the signal speed limit just jumped to 70 miles per hour, and I've now gone immediately to full power to accelerate towards that speed, getting a little bit tired there of travelling at 15 miles per hour, or 4 minutes to the mile, where at 70 miles per hour it's just over a mile a minute instead, which is a much better speed to be travelling at. As we approach 70 miles per hour, I'm going to go to a low power setting to try and maintain this speed. We're now coming up on Nassau Boulevard Station with 1 3/4 miles to go to an upcoming 60 mile per hour speed limit. We'll shortly be coming up on Stewart Manor Station with 3/4 of a mile to go to the upcoming 60 limit, and so as we approach this station here I'm going to idle the power and just allow the train to coast. The 60 mph speed limit comes into force at the next right-hand curve after this one, and as I slow for that 60 approaching that curve, I'm going to continue braking for an upcoming 45 mph speed restriction, which comes into force very quickly at the next left curve, which is very quickly after the right curve. So now down to 60 mph, and I'm continuing to slow down for the upcoming 45. You can just see that left curve coming up now. At the other end of the left curve is then the station that we're stopping at, Floral Park. And at Floral Park Station I'm aiming to stop near the end of the platform. That's the MU8 sign. Just realised there that the stop markers were still turned on, so I'll just press Ctrl and 7 to turn them off, as I don't need the HUD to tell me where to stop in this train. I called it the MU8 sign. It's actually the 8MU sign that I'm looking out for, which should be coming up shortly. So we've got the 4 and 6MU sign just there on the right, and then the 8MU is the sign immediately after that. So I brake slightly too early. I suppose it makes for quite a gentle stop here. And so here we are, arrival at Floral Park. Departing away from Floral Park, the line speed is now 70 mph, but we're currently under a 60 mph speed restriction by the signals. And the line speed is also soon dropping down to 60 mph. And we've got around 5 3/4 miles to go to our next stop, which is Jamaica. So the signal speed's now 70 mph, but I'm not going to go above 60 mph at this point due to the current line speed. We're now passing Bellerose Station. Noticed that we slipped slightly over the speed limit there, so the ATC system, should I say, just told us that, and I just reduced the speed down to below 60 and reset the alarm there. The signal speed's now gone up to 80 mph at the same time as the line speed has gone up to 80 mph, so I'm now able to accelerate up towards that, which is the maximum speed that we'll be able to get up to on this journey today. We're now passing Queen's Village Station. Now that we're doing around 80 miles per hour, I'm just going to go between idle and low power to try and maintain this speed. We're now coming up on Hollis station with 1.5 miles to go to an upcoming 30 mile per hour speed limit. We're also now shortly coming up on Hillside station, which marks 1 mile to go to the upcoming 30 limit. And for some reason, when looking at a map of the Long Island Railroad, I couldn't actually see Hillside station marked. So I don't know whether this is now a closed station or something. That's probably the best reason that I can think of. But certainly this station isn't marked on any Long Island Railroad maps today. I'm going to start applying the brakes for the upcoming 30 mile per hour speed limit in a moment at this signal just coming up with an immediate left curve and an overbridge. So at this point I'm now going to start braking for the upcoming 30. Now down to 30 miles per hour in time. The 30 mile per hour speed restriction comes into force here just as we reach this point where we're now crossing over to the right. At this point we've now got around 1 mile to go to Jamaica. So I'm now slowing down to 15 miles per hour due to the newly imposed signal speed limit of 15 miles per hour there. And now it looks like we're on an enforced 15 mile per hour speed limit for most of the way into Jamaica Station. Just applied some low power as we'd slowed down to 13 miles per hour. Just want to try and bring us back up to 15 before shutting off the power once again. Here at Jamaica Station, I'm aiming to stop very close to the end of the platform, just as the platform roof on the right-hand side disappears. So you can see the roof there. And just as that's disappeared into the right of the driver's window, that's roughly the correct stopping point. And so here we are, arrival at Jamaica. Departing away from Jamaica, the signal speed limit here is 15 miles per hour, though the line speed is currently 35 miles per hour. And we've got around 10 miles to go to our next and final stop, which is New York Penn Station. Now that we're doing 15 miles per hour, I've just shut off the power to allow the train to coast. And then in a moment, as we enter quite a sharp right-hand curve, there's then going to be a gradient change where we're going to start climbing at 1 in 108. So then at that point, I'm going to need to give us some power. But before that, we're going to be crossing a point to the right on this curve, and the speed limit over that point is just 10 miles per hour. So I'm looking out for that point ahead. As soon as I see it, I'm going to make sure that we do slow down to 10 miles per hour in time. So we're now down to 10 miles per hour in time for crossing this point here, and we're now going to be stuck at 10 miles per hour until the rear of the train has cleared this junction. So the power just cut out for a moment there as we were actually gapped between the third rail. So there was a gap in the third rail and we didn't actually have any power. So I dread to think what would happen if you ended up stopped in a gap, as you may struggle to get started again. We can accelerate back up towards 15 miles per hour now as we approach this fence you can just see there on the right hand side. I can now be sure that the rear of the train has cleared the junction. Certainly not much of a speed increase, though to be fair it's a third faster than what we were doing a moment ago. At 10 miles per hour then you're at 6 minutes to cover 1 mile. So the signal speed limit has just jumped to 60 miles per hour. And we can now accelerate up to the current line speed of 35 miles per hour. Now going to pass this signal gantry, then there's a point to the left and then a second signal gantry. At the second gantry just here, the line speed is then going up to 80 miles per hour. So as the line speed's now 80, I'm going to accelerate up to the 60 signal speed until the signal speed increases further. The signal speed is now 80 miles per hour, so I can continue to accelerate here. And we're now passing Kew Gardens station. Now that we're approaching 80 miles per hour, I'm going to go between idle and low power once again to try and maintain this speed. We're now coming up on Forest Hills Station with 8 miles to go. Now about to start on a down 1 in 200 gradient, which is going to affect our speed here, so I've got to check our speed and potentially use the brakes to control our speed at this point. So there's quite a tall, large building coming up on the right-hand side. As we reach that building, we've got 1.5 miles to go to an upcoming 60 mile per hour speed restriction. I'm going to apply the brakes for the 60 mile per hour speed limit just after the next right hand curve, with the speed limit starting at the following right hand curve. So now it's time to slow down for the upcoming 60 limit. We're now down to 60 in time for the curve just here. At this point we've now got 1 mile to go to an upcoming 45 mile per hour speed restriction. We're now coming up on Woodside Station, and I'm going to brake for the upcoming 45 limit as we enter the platform here, as the 45 limit comes into force immediately after passing through the station. Now that we're doing 45, I'm just going to allow the train to coast for a moment. We will shortly be on a descending left curve, as steep as 1 in 50, so I'm going to need to use the brakes to control our speed as we do this descent. And then shortly after the descent there is a further speed limit reduction down to 30 miles per hour for an upcoming junction which we will be crossing. So we've just started on the 1 in 50 downward gradient now, And I've got the brakes on to try and control our speed here. So just finishing the descent at this point, we're now about to start a climb of up 1 in 143. There's also the 30-mile-per-hour junction just coming up. So I'm continuing to slow down at this point to ensure that we're down to 30 in time. Also note that the signal speed has now dropped to 40 miles per hour. The signal speed's now jumped to 60 miles per hour, as has the line speed. At this point I can be sure that the rear of the train has cleared the junction, so we can now accelerate back up to 60 miles per hour. Now just going to allow the train to coast briefly, and then I will apply a little bit of power if we start losing speed. In fact, we're gaining speed slightly. We just jumped to 61 there, so just cut the power back to prevent us from breaking the speed limit any further. There is a downward 1 in 200 gradient here, but I wasn't sure at which point it started, so I guess we're already on that gradient, and that's why our speed increased slightly. The gradient's going to be getting much steeper downhill in a moment as we head towards the tunnel which we go through on the approach to New York Penn Station. So we're now currently on a 1 in 67 downward grade, which will steepen to 1 in 53 as we enter the tunnel coming up. So we enter this tunnel on a downward grade, then it temporarily levels out before a steep upward grade of around 1 in 67. And as we approach the other end of this tunnel, the speed limit is then going to be dropping down to 15 miles per hour for the remainder of the journey into New York Penn Station. At present I'm still using the brakes to control our speed, but it looks like I can see that there's a gradient change here, so I shouldn't actually need to use the brakes any longer. I'm now just giving us a small amount of power here. At the next visible gradient change within the tunnel, I need to start slowing down for the upcoming 15 mile per hour speed limit, and I can see that gradient change coming up just ahead. So we've just reached the gradient change now, and I'm now going to apply the brakes for the upcoming 15. Just reduce the braking there as we're slowing down slightly too quickly. The 15 limit comes into force just after we've finished passing through the tunnel bore here at the next upcoming signal. So we're now down to 15 miles per hour in time for that. You can now see the platforms at New York Penn Station coming up just ahead, and the signal speed has now also dropped to 15 miles per hour. Here at New York Penn Station, once we've driven through the platform here, I'm aiming to stop just before the signal at the end of the platform. And so we should now be stopping in just about the right place. Here we are, arrival at New York Penn Station, and the end of the first video in Train Sim World in quite some time, with another one to follow soon, which should be on the Northeast Corridor route, as well as one on the new Transpennine route between Manchester and Leeds, hopefully pretty much as soon as that route releases. So thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope that you did enjoy it. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please don't forget that for the latest channel updates, you can find me on Facebook, with the link to my Facebook page in the video description. And if you'd like to sponsor this channel, then please visit my Patreon page for more information. And once again, the link to that is in the video description. Once again, thank you for watching.